Okay, 2023. Look at this. That's too many books. Okay, so you want to play some Dungeons and Dragons, but you Googled it and found like dozens of books published over the course of 50 years and have no idea where to start? Well, you're in the right place. And if you're already familiar with D&D and you're just curious to hear some quick reviews of all these books, you're in the right place too. In fact, anyone who clicked on this video is in the right place. Please keep watching no matter what. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through all 44 Dungeons and Dragons books and box sets that have been published for 5th edition D&D. Can you believe it's 44 already? Jeez. Also, you may or may not know that many of the books published by the big company of D&D have fantastic alternatives or supplements published by smaller game companies or independent authors, so I'll be highlighting a few of those as well. But FYI, none of these books are sponsors. There will be a sponsor in this video, but we'll get to that later. Most importantly, I want you to know that while I've been playing D&D and similar games for about 8 years, I didn't buy a single D&D book until I was 2 years into this hobby, and today, I don't rely on the books very often because more books do not make this game more fun. What makes these games fun is your own creativity, how you and your fellow players imagine fantastic adventures through mere conversation, and you all embrace the randomness of rolling funny dice to see what happens. That is the spirit of Dungeons and Dragons, not these books. And that's what this channel is all about. Just learning how to have more fun playing these games together. And my name is Bob, and I did this intro backwards, but in that spirit of learning together, please leave a comment below if you have any experience with any number of D&D books from any edition. Share with the rest of us. Which book has been the most valuable toward creating fun games at your table? Thank you. So while you experienced folks are pondering and writing your comments down there, I need to talk to the noobs for a second. Whatever they say in the comments, I think the first thing you should check out as a total beginner to D&D is Cairn. Now there's a very important reason I recommend starting with this little booklet instead of any of the official D&D starter sets. Dungeons & Dragons 5e is a complicated game, but the basics are very simple, and those basics are better expressed in rules-light indie games like Cairn. Not to mention, the digital version is free on DriveThruRPG, link below. The Cairn booklet does cost a couple bucks, and you'll need to buy a set of dice to play it, but in less than 1 hour, you can read this whole 20-page book, watch my video about how to play it, make up a simple location with some monsters to fight and some treasures to claim, and you'll be ready to begin your first role-playing game session. Then, after you try out Cairn, or if you decide off the bat that you want a more complete package, I recommend getting the newest D&D starter set with the blue dragon on the cover, because while each D&D box set gives you a lot of bang for your buck, there's dice, a basic rulebook, an adventure to play, character sheets, and more. This one doesn't overwhelm you with the extra stuff, and the character sheets in this particular set have explicit instructions for how to use your character's special features, which I think is super awesome for beginners. Also, I have run the adventure in here, Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, made some videos about it. It's pretty fun. After that set, or if you already have some experience with D&D, I'd recommend getting the Essentials Kit with the white dragon on the cover. I just didn't keep the box. This set contains a slightly larger rulebook explaining how to make your own characters, plus a few extra dice, a bunch of cards, a fold-out map, a free-form adventure, The Dragon of Icespire Peak, and really, Icespire Peak just provides a dozen or so adventure locations that you can play as a whole story, or as little one-off game sessions, and that flexibility, plus all the resources, makes this one of my favorite D&D resources. I've actually made a whole video series about the set in this adventure because it's a lot of fun. Recently, however, I ran the original D&D 5e starter set with the green dragon on the cover, and I gotta say, this one was also a lot of fun, but the rulebook is not very beginner friendly. And it kind of makes sense. This was the first product published for 5th edition, so it's really written for people who had experience with previous editions of the game, not total beginners to RPGs. And you should know that the fun adventure in here, Lost Mine of Phandelver, is free online at dndbeyond.com. Finally, if you're really into Rick and Morty or Stranger Things, there are D&D crossover box sets based on those shows. I have not played either myself, but I've heard they're both pretty good. But if by any chance you'd like to get some amazing artwork for your gaming space, you should check out our sponsor, Displate. Displate creates unique metal posters of D&D art, vintage art and landscapes, cat memes, classic fantasy artwork, and more. Their magnetic wall mount system is super easy, it involves no drilling, and even in my old apartment where other big name adhesive mounting tools tore off the paint when we moved, Displate didn't leave a mark. But once you have a magnet in place, you can switch the design whenever you want. Each high-quality design is printed in Europe and signed by Displate's master of production before being shipped worldwide. And speaking of the world, Displate partners with conservation organizations to plant a tree for every design sold. They work with Star Wars, Marvel, DC, Elden Ring, Witcher, Lord of the Rings, Stranger Things, Elder Scrolls, and a ton of awesome nerdy brands, offering over 1 million different designs. You can start your collection and save 20% on 1 or 2 Displates, or save 30% on 3 or more Displates using the referral link in the description or code BOB at checkout to let them know who sent you. Okay, we're done with boxes, on to the books, because by now you've played through a couple D&D adventures and you want a more complete understanding of the game. You want the one and only core rulebook of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, the Player's Handbook. I emphasize the one and only core book because D&D does this weird thing where they call 3 different books the core rules, but I promise you, the Player's Handbook is the only core book for this game. AKA the PHB, this book has more rules and character options than you could possibly need, like character classes that go all the way to level 20, while statistically, most groups only play till about level 12. The best part though is that most of this book is totally and utterly free. Like without piracy. Basically, at the beginning of 2023, D&D tried to impose really harsh royalties and other restrictions on how independent publishers can publish things independently. Fortunately, it totally backfired, and to try to make up for it, D&D released all the core rules under Creative Commons in a free PDF called the System Reference Document, linked down in the description. Since this free SRD covers the entire core rules of the game, it actually comes with even more monsters and way more magic items than what you get if you buy the Player's Handbook. But what you don't get with the SRD is any of the amazing artwork from the Player's Handbook, or the convenience of flipping through a physical book versus scrolling through a 400-page PDF with no bookmarks. Then whether you go for the PHB or the SRD, you should really consider if you're enjoying D&D 5e. There are unique RPGs for Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, cyberpunk, Lovecraftian horror, and even a game about being a tough little mouse or a skateboarding wizard. I have a video about this one because it's awesome. Or if you want to stick with D&D style fantasy, but you want more intricate and detailed rules, try Pathfinder. If you like D&D but wish it was a little less like a Marvel movie and a little more like a 80s Conan movie, try Dungeon Crawl Classics. It's great to experiment with other games because you'll learn new rules and fun ways of doing things that you never would have come across if you develop tunnel vision for one single game. And I recommend exploring other games early in your RPG journey because once you spend a bunch of money on rulebooks for just D&D, you might feel kind of stuck with just D&D. However, let's not forget that if you're having fun with just D&D, by all means, get stuck in that fun. That is what these games are all about. And now, you have another decision to make. If you're riding the D&D hype train and you prefer playing as a single player character, you might want to look into the supplemental rulebooks, like the ones I have buried under this stuff, Xanathar's Guide to Everything, and Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. These are the official D&D 5e books, just packed to the brim with powerful character options, mainly subclasses, and I personally prefer Xanathar's because it contains very useful tables of random names, random encounters, as well as low-level magic items, new spells, and in general, just the extra stuff that I actually use. Tasha's Cauldron is also cool, but in the couple years that I've had it, I almost never actually use this book. And since it came out more recently, it is worth noting that the character options in here are not as well balanced as with the core rules of the game. So if you only want one of these two, I personally recommend Xanathar's Guide. However, there are tons of independently published 5e supplemental books. The two most highly reviewed that I know of are The Ultimate Adventurer's Handbook and Valda's Spire of Secrets. Both are completely 5e compatible, and each one has like 100 new subclasses, new races, new spells, everything. So if you're really into tinkering with character options, these third-party 5e books will give you a lot more material to explore. Now, if you're riding the D&D hype train and you like being a dungeon master more than a player character, or you're thinking about running a game but aren't sure if you have what it takes to DM, first of all, you totally do. I believe in you. It'll be easier if you check out Sly Flourish's Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. Now, but unlike the official D&D Dungeon Master's Guide, Return of the Lazy DM gives you concise, step-by-step processes for how to plan out original, fun, and memorable adventures for your players. So if that's your goal, to run and play fun games, this book will most likely be more useful for you than this one. Alright, and if you've been keeping track, we've now only talked about 10-ish of the official boxes and books out of the 44 total, and that's because the other 34 books are all extra stuff that will mostly just appeal to dungeon masters. However, players who are really into lore will also appreciate these books. And by the way, if you're finding this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up because that will help it reach more people. So if you're primarily a dungeon master and you love to build your own worlds and prepare your own original quests, then all you really need are monsters. I did a quick count, and there are over 300 creature stat blocks available for free in the system reference document we talked about earlier. And that's definitely more monsters than you'll ever really need. You can always modify one of those creatures and build your own monsters, and there's even a sort section in there about how to modify creatures and build your own monsters. That said, the SRD does not include any of the amazing artwork for all these monsters or any of the lore about where and how these monsters live. That information is fun for game masters and players, and you can get a lot of that online. But if you want it all in one convenient physical book, you should get the 5e Monster Manual. Besides the Player's Handbook, the Monster Manual is probably the most used D&D rulebook on my shelf and everyone else's, but I guess I'd have to check those comments from earlier to find out. Then if for some reason you want more than 300 plus monsters, I recommend checking out the Tome of Beasts book series by Kobold Press. I personally only learned about the Tome of Beasts after I owned some other monster books, so I never picked one up, but I've heard many folks say that these are the best bestiaries you can buy. The other monster books on my shelf are Volo's Guide to Monsters and Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. Personally, I prefer the standard fantasy theme of Volo's over the extraplanar demons and devils theme of Mordenkainen's, but both books are great because they contain a bunch of monsters, plus fun character options, and chapters of lore about these iconic creatures. Unfortunately, D&D decided to stop printing these two books, and instead combine the monsters and character options into one new book called Monsters of the Multiverse. But in doing so, they cut out all the awesome lore about these iconic creatures, and for me, that makes this new book far less valuable. So if you're all about the lore, I recommend checking out a friendly local game store or a used bookstore to see if you can find a used copy of one of those two. Now speaking of lore, this next category can easily appeal to players and game masters alike, but especially GMs who just don't enjoy building their own worlds. These are the D&D setting books. Setting books typically contain some character options like a couple new races or subclasses, a few new spells and magic items, a few new monsters, a low-level adventure to help get a feel for adventuring in the setting, and then tons of lore. So let's fly through the 10 current D&D 5e setting books, then give a couple third-party recommendations. Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide was the first D&D 5e setting book to come out, and many people say the information is redundant with the information you get in any of the first several D&D 5e campaign books, and I personally have avoided this one based on that popular opinion. Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica was the first Magic the Gathering setting ported into D&D 5e, and many folks say the Magic the Gathering setting books are actually the best D&D setting books, but I'm not into Magic the Gathering. I never heard of Ravnica before this one came out, so I just didn't buy it. Acquisitions Incorporated is based on one of the first popular live play D&D shows, but ironically, I think this is one of the least well-known D&D setting books because I've never heard anyone say anything about it except for comments on previous videos like this one where a couple people come out of nowhere to say it's pretty cool. Eberron, Rising from the Last War is a mix of a swashbuckling adventure and noir mystery packaged in a futuristic setting of magical technology, but don't call it sci-fi, because in last year's video I called it sci-fi, and some people assured me that it's not sci-fi. Overall though, I've heard that Eberron is the best D&D 5e setting book published to date. I just never bought it because I prefer generic fantasy stuff, and that's why I thought it was sci-fi. Explorer's Guide to Wildmount is the region where Critical Role's second campaign series takes place. However, Critical Role now has their own setting book for their entire campaign world, Tal'Dorei Reborn. And according to a lot of people, including my wife, Grace World Destroyer, Tal'Dorei Reborn is one of the best setting books ever written. Mythic Odysseys of Theros is another Magic the Gathering setting, this time heavily based on the themes, aesthetic, and stories of Greek mythology. I own this one because my wife really loves Greek mythology, and I've also enjoyed reading it, but I've never heard any major complaints about it, or really a lot of praise for it, so I think it might just be an average setting book, but gosh darn it, this special edition cover is like my favorite D&D cover ever. Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft was a big hit because it filled a gap for horror and mystery in D&D 5e, but once again, it just didn't seem like something that I needed to own. Similar to Strixhaven, A Curriculum of Chaos, which is yet another Magic the Gathering setting, this time with pretty mixed reviews. It's all about role-playing within a wizard school, which seems like a lot of fun and many people agreed, but a lot of people also said the contents really fell flat. And this is around the time when that started to become a theme with official D&D products. Case in point, Spelljammer. Spelljammer is technically a 3-book box set that was poorly received for a number of reasons, including but not limited to not consulting the original creators of the setting from 2nd edition D&D, being a seafaring space travel rulebook that omitted rules for ship-to-ship combat, overall lower page count than people hoped for, as well as including a wildly insensitive portrayal of one of the character types that had to be redacted and rewritten. So Spelljammer was a prime example of how the companies that control D&D, who are more concerned with quantity of production and sales over the quality of that production, can sometimes make it really difficult for D&D's design team to actually design high-quality game material, versus the smaller publishing companies that are out there producing amazing work, like Lord of the Rings 5e by Free League Publishing. This is a stunning rendition of J.R.R. Tolkien's work converted to 5e D&D, but if you're really into Lord of the Rings, you don't want this 5e version, you want The One Ring 2e by the same publisher, which is not only a setting, but now an entire game system devoted to bringing Middle-earth to life at your table. There's a main rulebook for One Ring 2e and a starter set box, which I'd recommend starting with unless you're really familiar with D6 dice pool systems. Similarly, if you're really into Lovecraftian horror, you might want to check out Cthulhu. Oh, this is the wrong one. You might want to check out the Cthulhu Mythos for 5e Fantasy, or you can just go all the way and buy the Call of Cthulhu starter set or rulebook to play an entire game based on those themes. And a quick one, Historica Arcanum by Metis Media is a wonderfully rich historical fiction fantasy take on the real-world city of Istanbul during its height in the Victorian era that includes a substantial 5e adventure to go along with it. It's just a perfect example of the high-quality niche products that obviously might not be interesting to everybody, but it's something that official D&D could never ever have successfully produced in their current state. Okay. This next category is a weird one. I boiled it down to being pretty much just for game masters, and specifically for game masters who do not like world building, do not like writing their own adventures, but still have a lot of time on their hands to read 300-page books and prepare notes for their game sessions. Or for people who just really like specific adventure themes and want to read about them for fun. These are the big campaign books where it seems like most of the work should be done for you, but you still have to study the entire book, and if you can't tell, I've learned the hard way that the large campaign books don't really fit my personal GMing style very well, so take this part with a grain of salt. Hoard of the Dragon Queen and Rise of Tiamat are the first 2 campaign books published for D&D 5e, and they are widely considered to be the worst 2 campaign books published for D&D 5e. Because of that terrible reception, I've never bothered to read them myself. Princes of the Apocalypse is also considered to be pretty bad, but I personally enjoyed playing through most of this one with my friends. My wife, however, who was our game master, said it was definitely a challenge to run, so we ended up donating that book. That said, all 3 of these are partially overland adventures through various environments mixed with dungeon crawling, and that's what I like. So, like I said earlier, your enjoyment will probably hang on what themes you prefer in your RPG adventures. For example, Out of the Abyss is a sprawling subterranean adventure through one of D&D's most infamous regions,
the Underdark.
I found this campaign to be a lot of fun as a player until about 1 year into the campaign, where the overbearing theme, the Underdark, became less and less exciting over time because it's just all caves and caves forever. But we finished it and decided we would never play it again, so we donated that book too. Curse of Strahd is incredibly popular, highly praised. Who doesn't love fighting vampires after all? In fact, the only complaints I've ever heard about Curse of Strahd is that the first section, the Death House, is too deadly. What were you expecting? Storm King's Thunder is another overland campaign with a sort of Norse mythology giants theme to it, and this campaign book is the one that apparently includes all the same lore as the Sword Coast setting book, as well as a good deal of lore about giants. But I'm not particularly into giants, so I just never bought this one. Tomb of Annihilation, on the other hand, is the jungle-themed hexcrawl adventure that also has a massive deadly dungeon inspired by the original D&D Tomb of Horrors, plus the creator of Adventure Time was a design consultant for this book. And it really shows. There's just a lot of little silly things in here that make it fun to read. And since I love forests, dungeons, and Adventure Time, I love this book. Waterdeep Dragon Heist is an urban-themed mystery adventure where the party is trying to find out who stole a bunch of gold. They themselves are not performing a heist, just to make that clear, and the adventure is written such that the main villain depends on which season of the year you run the adventure, which gives this book way more replayability than most D&D adventures. On a personal note though, my wife played through this book twice and basically said that if it wasn't for the group she played with being fun, this adventure might not have been that fun on its own. I think the only reason we still own this one is because we're both kind of interested in the sequel, Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage, where the party explores a huge mega dungeon beneath the city of Waterdeep, potentially all the way to level 20. Also, I've never really heard anyone praising or complaining about Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage, probably because it's just average, and almost certainly because nobody actually plays high-level D&D. Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus is a desert hellscape, kind of Mad Max themed adventure that seems pretty freaking metal, and most of the adventure takes place in hell. So my wife really wanted this book because she likes all the satanic parts of D&D. But I have heard that the first few levels taking place in the city of Baldur's Gate before you go to hell are pretty bad. We'll find out one day. Next, Tyranny of Dragons is a reprint of The Hoard of the Dragon Queen and Rise of Tiamat, but according to the internet, they didn't make the campaign any more fun to play. Icewind Dale Rime of the Frost Maiden is an epic Arctic horror adventure and setting book and bestiary all in one that probably should have been a box set like Spelljammer. I really like this theme, and while I found the adventure itself to be a little disjointed, the book gives you a ton of material to use and play with. So for my style, this one worked quite well. I just don't have it anymore because I donated it to my old high school. The Wild Beyond the Witchlight is apparently the best-selling D&D 5e campaign book, following a classic Feywild theme of fairies and their shenanigans, so probably a lot of fun. I just couldn't get past the carnival-themed beginning because it doesn't just fit with like how I imagine D&D should be. However, this is a very popular book, and a unique feature is that every combat encounter is written with alternatives to avoid fighting in one way or another. So it's almost certainly worth reading just to expand one's perception about how D&D encounters can play out. Critical Role Call from the Netherdeep is another campaign that I've heard very little praise or complaints about. The one thing I know is that it involves a rival adventuring party working against the players, but nothing really jumped out at me that made me want to buy this one. Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen received kinda mixed reviews because many people wanted this to be more of a setting book for Dragonlance, which is a major D&D setting from older editions, but this book is a campaign. Finally, Phandelver and Below, the Shattered Obelisk, is coming either later this year or early next year, and it promises to build on the awesome adventure from the original D&D 5e starter set, as well as tie together this underlying plot of mysterious black obelisks that have been scattered throughout the D&D 5e setting books and campaign books over the last decade, and I have a whole theory about where they're going with it, so I don't know if I'm going to buy this book, but I'm pretty excited to see whether or not my predictions are correct. Okay, this last category of books is my favorite, because I like reading short adventure modules. You can quickly skim through it and decide whether or not it seems cool, and if so, where it would fit into your setting, and how you can make easy changes. And that's the kind of session prep that I personally enjoy. So I think D&D's adventure anthologies can provide a lot of value to game masters. The important thing is to pick the right anthology. Tales from the Yawning Portal and Ghosts of Saltmarsh each contain 7 classic D&D adventure modules converted to 5th edition. The only reason that I don't own these is because I already own too many modules that I haven't run yet. Candlekeep Mysteries is a collection of 17 generic high fantasy adventures from level 1 all the way to level 16, and we've played a few of them, and they were fun. Meanwhile, Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel contains 13 high fantasy adventures from level 1 to 14, specifically influenced by real-world cultures and folklore outside of the typical European folklore that D&D is based on. So I really enjoyed reading them, I just haven't run any of them yet. And Keys from the Golden Vault contains 13 high fantasy adventures from level 1 to 11, and unlike the Dragon Heist campaign book, my wife, who read all these, said that these adventures actually seem to be more like legitimate heists. Now, here's the real secret. Everybody writes and publishes adventures compatible with D&D 5e. A couple of my favorite 5e adventures have been modules from Goodman Games' 5th edition fantasy series, and I myself have published a bunch of short 5e one-shot adventures with original monsters, items, and other drag-and-drop resources to truly make them modular adventures. But remember, it's that freedom to just pick apart an adventure or create something totally new for your own group that makes these games special. If you agree, please give this video a thumbs up and consider checking out my 5e adventures on the shop tab of my Patreon, linked somewhere on your screen, as an awesome way to support the channel. And as always, thank you to the Bob World Builder patrons who make all this possible. Thanks to our amazing sponsor, Displates. Thank you for your support with comments and likes and sharing this video, and keep building.